And I feel like we did lose a lot of respect from community members because of what happened. When people have seen what's happened to the museum, we really cleaned it up inside. Outside looks fantastic. We're really, really trying to do things for the community. It's just really important to me that we look good and we look appealing, and tourists want to come here, and even local people want to come here. So it took a lot of work, and it took a lot of money slowly over the years to sort of build that trust back, I think.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Total Michigan, where we interview ordinary Michiganders doing some pretty extraordinary things. I'm your host, Cliff Duvernois. So it's summertime, and that means we are traveling, and one of the top destinations in Michigan that people like to go is the Upper Peninsula. And I'm very fortunate because I've been spending a lot of time in Marquette, and I got to tell you, this town is growing on me, and the more time I spend here with the locals, the more I'm loving it. One of the things that I always love to do when coming to a new town is talk to one of the local museums, because they really know the history and the story behind the town and can really help shine a good light on what it is that people here are doing. So with that being said, today I'm at the Marquette Maritime Museum with Executive Director Hilary Billman. Hilary, how are you?
I'm great, thank you.
Excellent. Why don't you tell us, what is the Marquette Maritime Museum?
Well, Marquette started out as a shipping port town. And so in the 80s, there was a group of people that decided that we really needed a maritime museum to interpret and preserve the maritime history of the area, which is shipwrecks, lighthouses, fishing, anything to do with that beautiful lake that we're right next to.
And so with the museum, this primarily started off as just a shipping port.
Yes. So iron ore was discovered in the area in the late 1840s, and they had to get the ore out of Marquette and get it down, into the lower Great Lakes. And so the Soo Locks opened in 1855, and we just became a big shipping port on Lake Superior to get the iron ore out of Marquette.
Nice. And so, Hilary, let's take a step back here for a second, and let's talk a little bit about your journey. So where are you from? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri.
Okay.
And yeah, my parents are from England, and my dad ended up coming to University of Missouri St. Louis to work as a chemistry professor, and they ended up going back to England to have me, their last child. But yeah, grew up in St. Louis and had a great childhood there.
So what brought you to Marquette?
My husband and I'm married to John Billman. He's a writer and a professor at Northern Michigan University. We've lived in a lot of different places. We've traveled around a lot. And then we had kids and decided it was time to settle down. So we moved here from Oklahoma. We've been here, this will be our 11th year here. We were looking for just a great place to raise our children, and we found it in Marquette.
Now, is this one of the situations where he managed to get a job at the university and you said, here you go, or this was
Yes.
just one of many?
No, this is where we wanted to move here. There was a job opening, and he applied right away, and he got the job. So we were very lucky that way. So yeah, he's in the English department at Northern Michigan University.
So you said something here I would like to explore, because I'm a newbie to Marquette, but you said this is where you wanted to go. What was it about Marquette in particular that attracted you to it?
Well, we like snow, which you have to like if you live in Marquette. So
Yes, you
we
do.
love to cross-country ski and outdoor. I mean, we live in a log cabin just off the Chocolate
Oh,
River, about
beautiful.
10 miles south of town. So it just kind of hit all the boxes that we wanted.
So now, did you go to university?
Yes. So I went to DePaul University in Indiana, and then I have a Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing and a Master of Arts in Technical Writing from Eastern Washington University in Spokane, Washington, and that's where I met my husband.
You have been all over.
Yeah. Yeah.
For sure. So then with your background, wow, so that's a lot. So let's step back. How did you get involved with the museum?
So when we lived in Wyoming, see, I told you we lived everywhere.
Yes, you have.
We lived in Wyoming, and we lived in a small town that was mostly coal mining, and my husband was teaching middle school there, and there weren't very many jobs for people that weren't either teachers in the schools or, a coal miner. And they have a small museum there that they decided they were going to hire a full-time director. And they wanted somebody that could write grants. So I applied for the job, and I got the job.
Oh.
So it was coal mining, bootlegging, and prostitution. And so I started out this museum, and I kind of learned as I went, and figured out how to write grants, how to do the exhibits and different things like that. And we were there almost 7 years until we decided that we actually needed better health insurance and things for our children. So
Sure.
my husband started applying for university jobs at that point. So we did move out of Wyoming. But yeah, I started out not knowing a lot about museums, and now it has become my career.
So I know that because I know you said you didn't start out knowing a lot about it. So during all of the college classes that you took, there was nothing about
No,
museum
no, I
curation
don't
or
have history, and I don't have any history
okay,
background, but I've always been fascinated with history. So that's always been a hobby of mine. Everywhere we go to museums,
sure.
and I love finding out about places. And then grant writing, grant writing's grant writing. You just, you learn the basics of grant writing. And that was just my step into that world. And, I learned everything from that, just from that point on.
So now you have made the move from Wyoming to Marquette. Your husband's got the job teaching at the university. You got
Yeah.
better health insurance.
Yeah. hmm
How did you get involved with the Maritime Museum here?
Okay. Yeah. And I will also say that in between Wyoming and Marquette, we lived in, you ready? New Mexico, Iowa, and Oklahoma, and then Marquette.
There's
So, yeah. Yeah. So, and ask me the question one more time because I got sidetracked with the.
That's perfectly okay. So now your husband has moved from where was the last place?
Oh,
Oklahoma?
yeah, Oklahoma. So, how did I get the job? Is that what you were asking?
Right. When you moved here, how did you get attached to the
Yeah.
museum?
So I just, they were looking for a director. There had been some issues with the previous director, and she wasn't working here any longer. So they were looking for a director, and a friend of mine knew my background and told another friend who knew a board member who contacted me and said, why don't you send in your resume and we'll try to get it set up so we can come in and talk to some board members, and that's where it happened.
So what I would like to do is I would just like to take just a quick minute or two to talk about like what happened before you came on board,
Mhm.
because I think that's instrumental in what a big success this
Yeah.
museum has come to this day. So why don't you talk to us a little bit about the circumstances that brought you into this position?
Right. So when they hired me, basically the museum had no money in the bank, and the board was doing everything because the previous director had embezzled funds and pretty much emptied our bank accounts. And there were a lot of things going on that the board didn't know about that they very quickly became aware of. And so they were looking basically for somebody to come in and at first just keep the doors open and just keep it going, try to get as many volunteers as we could. And so they hired me, and I was basically like starting over here. We did a lot of cleaning, updated a lot of exhibits. I started writing grants, saving a little bit of money. So slowly, our bank account got a little bit better and healthier. Today we're in a great place where if there's actually something that we want to do, we have the funds to do it. And
Awesome.
our board is really strong. Made our board even stronger. They figured out a little bit even more about things that they had to do to run the museum. And they've always been a working board, but boy, they really had to dig their heels in and kind of get us out of that hole. But yeah, it's been a journey, but we're in a great place right now.
So why do you think it is that, because with the previous director coming on board and seeing how in what poor shape the museum was in, financially speaking, exhibit wise, I can imagine a lot of trust with the community. So why is it that the board decided to keep pushing through, like keep this open rather than say, you know what, it was a good run. Let's just
Right.
close the doors.
I think because it is so important to Marquette. Preserving the maritime history, we are a maritime town. And everybody that's on the board, we tend to get board members that aren't just looking for volunteer work. They feel very strongly about the organization.
Nice.
Some of them are shipwreck hunters. Some of them are former scuba divers, teachers, artists, all kinds of different backgrounds, but they really love this place and they want to see it do well. We have one of the original 6 board members that actually started the museum from 1980 is still on the board. So
Nice.
there's a lot of community connections here. So it was just they feel something for this place.
And then I can imagine too, with you having built that museum essentially from the ground up in Wyoming, coming here, you were able to bring a lot of that skill set here.
Yeah, they're both small nonprofit museums, and you rely heavily on volunteers. so it's recruiting volunteers and, knowing how to treat your volunteers so they want to keep
Right.
coming back. Just all those lessons that I learned in Wyoming were, instrumental here.
And you said something else too that really kind of struck my curiosity is that a lot of the board members you were talking about seem to have a connection somehow with Lake Superior. Like you were talking about shipwreck divers and things like that. How important is that for them to have that connection to Lake Superior?
I think it's very important because it helped me even more because when I first was hired here, I mean, I can look up the history of the area, but I've really had to learn it as I go. And now I'm not an expert yet, but I'm getting really close on some of the details. I mean, I have all these dates shoved in my head, but they were really helpful. Anytime I have a question, I can ask any of them on, they all have their own little area of expertise.
Right.
And it was really helpful to be able to ask them for help when I need it.
And then one of the things I would like to explore real quick is that, after the previous director left and now you have come in and you're working on building this place up and getting money in the checking account, updating the exhibits. One of the big factors that kind of gets tarnished in this is the reputation
Yes.
of the museum. And I can imagine a lot of people were probably pretty upset because they've been coming here for years. They brought their kids here. We're
Yeah.
now bringing their kids here. And now all of a sudden, boom, this hits. And it was probably big news in the area when this came out. How do you go about building back that trust with the public?
Right. Well, it was interesting because I remember reading about it in the paper before I'd even considered the job here. And I remember thinking, wow, look what happened here. That kind of
Yeah,
that
they got
rumor
their
mill
hands
thing.
full.
You're like,
Yes.
wow, that's crazy. But it is, we did lose some members. And I feel like we did lose a lot of respect from community members because of what happened. Because even though in some ways a lot of it, we didn't do it, somebody else did it. It's, the accountability for it.
Yes.
But I think that when people have seen what's happened to the museum, we really cleaned it up inside. Outside looks fantastic. We have brand new windows. We were just able to fund a new roof. We're really, really trying to do things for the community. And where we're placed in the community right next to the lakeshore on the bike path, it's just really important to me that we look good and we look appealing and tourists want to come here and even local people want to come here. So it took a lot of work and it took a lot of money slowly over the years to sort of build that trust back, I think.
Yeah. And the word that you used there that really caught my attention is slowly,
Yeah.
because it's not something that you can just fix overnight.
No, no.
It's showing up a day after day after day and just keep putting that honesty forward,
Yeah.
so to speak.
Yeah.
And one of the things I know before the microphones went hot, you and I had discussed it, but one of the things you talked about making the board stronger, right? I think that's the term that you used earlier in the
Yeah.
interview, making the board stronger. One of those was creating a position of treasurer, which I have never heard of before in a nonprofit, but I think that's an excellent idea.
Yeah. Well, they had to redo everything with the finances on just so nothing happened again ever, and nothing. I mean, there are so many steps we have to go through, and it did. I mean, it's made us financially very strong now because we have to be so much more accountable for everything that we do, every penny that comes in. But everybody sort of took a different task and worked on it when they had to rebuild. And we had a brand new board member that came on as a treasurer and just took a whole new approach to how we do things.
Nice.
We got outside accountants to look at things and all the things that, probably should have done, but had been done before. But, for whatever reason, it hadn't occurred to some of them to do it that way. But now we're doing it.
Wonderful. For our audience, we're going to take a quick break and thank our sponsors. When we come back, we're going to talk about how the museum has improved, some of the exhibits that you can see when you come here, and what you can expect when you come here. We'll see you after the break. Hey, if you are enjoying these great interviews, just take a moment and go to totalmichigan.com/join, and you can get these episodes sent directly to your inbox because there's a lot more great stories coming. See you there. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Total Michigan, where we interview ordinary Michiganders doing some pretty extraordinary things. I'm your host, Cliff Duvenois. Today, we're at the Marquette Maritime Museum with Executive Director Hilary Billman. And Hilary, before the break, we were talking about how the museum has basically weathered this storm, no pun intended, and it's starting to come back better than ever. What I would like to do is I would like to talk about, because there's so much stuff here. This place is like densely packed. It's almost a little bit overwhelming. But the exhibits that you got here, all the goodies that you got here, Where did that come from? Is it private donations? How does that work?
So most of the items that we have, most of the artifacts are donations, private donations. We do have some loans from like the United States Coast Guard on some of our bigger artifacts.
Oh, perfect.
We try not to do a lot of loans just because we don't have a lot of storage area. So if we
Mm.
have to store things for people, it doesn't really work that well for us. But yeah, most of the stuff has been loaned from people throughout the years since we started in 1980.
And then how do you go about adding this stuff to your exhibit? Because every museum's got a flow to it.
Yes.
So the amount of square footage you have in here is at a premium,
Yes.
so until you buy another building, you kind of have to work with what you got.
Yes.
So how do you work to get in these new exhibits or these new donations that people have got that come in?
Right. So if we have something that comes in that we want to immediately exhibit, then we have to take something else out. So it all becomes just figuring out, how we're going to rotate. A lot of the things that we have in here, we don't rotate just because they're so important. Like our Fresnel lens collection is one of the best on the Great Lakes. We've got a diorama of the shipwreck of the Maryland, a couple of really important shipwrecks that we have. We also have exhibits dedicated specifically to them. But other than that, there are places where, like from last year, if you came back, like we're sitting right next to a case right now where this is a case where I can easily pull things out and put things back in if I need to.
Sure.
And we also have a exhibit space right next to our children's corner where I can change things out every year if I want to.
Oh, nice.
And so I try to do something really different than what we're doing with the rest of the museum in that space.
Now, it's not just the museum, but you also have a lighthouse.
We do, yes.
Talk to us about that.
Yes. So the lighthouse is actually owned by the city of Marquette. It was previously owned by the Coast Guard, and it was deeded to the city in 2016.
Oh, yeah.
But we have been doing tours of the lighthouse since about 2000. Even when it was Coast Guard property, we had special permission to go through the Coast Guard grounds and do the tours. We do 3 tours a day, Tuesday through Sunday, closed on Mondays. And those are done specifically by our amazing crew of volunteers. We have volunteers that have been coming back for years just to do the lighthouse
Nice.
tours. Now, in the lighthouse, you can go on the first floor of the lighthouse where we have a lot of exhibits. There's also a little basement space. Just this past year, the city has redone the second floor of the lighthouse, which has not been open to the public in years. So we kind of have the second floor of the lighthouse is a blank slate of all these empty rooms right now. They just finished
Cool.
painting it, and they're going to be doing the floors soon. So we do have more exhibit space up there that we're going to take some of the things from the museum and some of the things from the first floor in the lighthouse that sort of we can dedicate into specific exhibits on shipwrecks and
Right.
families in the lighthouse and that kind of thing. So yeah, we're very lucky to be able to have this lighthouse to tour also.
So now, because you've got all this unfettered access to it, and now the second floor is open, I guess the question for me then is that, does this give you another place to put all these historical artifacts?
It does. One thing about the lighthouse, though, is there's no heat up there. And so anything we put up there has to be able to withstand, no heat kind of
yes,
thing. So we're a maritime museum, too, which means a lot of our artifacts can withstand, weather, which is
Yes,
the point of the maritime. So, so we kind of think about that when we redo that second floor. We'll think about, how we're going to do that with the no heat and keeping things up there. And sometimes if you have like photographs and things, it just means you have to, get new copies of the photographs and change them out every couple of years because, if it's humid or something up there, there's no humidity control or anything. It's
Yep.
really just an old lighthouse that you get to walk through. So,
And somebody lived in that at one point.
oh yeah, there were 2 apartments, and it's 45 steps to get up into the lighthouse. And the Coast Guard families that used to live there right before they stopped having them live there used to have to carry their groceries up 45 steps, and they didn't like that. And it's kind of an old, damp building. And so, yeah, even though it's beautiful,
Yes.
it wasn't the most popular place to live towards the end.
Sweet Moses. Well, there's a question for Jeopardy right there.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about, because one of the things, with museums is you make it a point to have rotating exhibits throughout the years. Probably, talk to us about what are some of those exhibits that are going on now?
So one of our probably our most famous exhibits that we have in here now are the Fresnel lenses that we have in our main gallery. So we have a collection of Fresnel lenses, which are the original lenses that they used in lighthouses, that are made of glass in France from, anywhere from the 1860s up until they made them up into the 1900s. We have the #2 Fresnel lens from Standard Rock, which is a huge, beautiful piece of artwork. That's one of the artifacts that we have that belong to the U.S. Coast Guard that's on permanent display here.
Nice.
So we try to change out the exhibit that's around the Fresnel lenses because those aren't going anywhere. So we can update some of the things going on with the lighthouses, or every once in a while we'll get another type of lighthouse lens that we can sort of add to the collection to show how they've progressed through the years. So we're always trying to do that kind of thing. Every year I come in here and I look around and I think, okay, what needs to be updated? What haven't we done in a while? What needs to be updated? And so, like, we're sitting right in front of an exhibit that we updated just a couple of years ago. If you would have seen what the walls looked like on this exhibit about 5 years ago, this would have been your first choice to update. It was not very pretty. And so one of our board members is a mural artist. So she came in and just, painted
You
some.
love that when that happens.
Yeah. So
Yes.
we're so lucky she comes in and does some of that stuff for us. So yeah, we try to update everything. At least 2 exhibits a year is how we try to do it.
Now, to go back to the Fresnel lenses, because I'm really intrigued by this whole concept. So for somebody who might be listening to this, what is a Fresnel lens? How big are they? And you talked about how they came from France.
Yes.
Right.
So the Fresnel lenses were the original lenses that were in lighthouses. Now they have like the LED lenses that you don't need to tend to. You just go and check to make sure they're turned on or whatever.
Right.
So the Fresnel lenses used to be, sometimes they used whale oil to keep them lit, sometimes kerosene and then gasoline, and eventually they were electrified. But they were all made especially for each lighthouse that they sat in. So they came in 6 sizes.
Wow.
1 is the smallest, I'm sorry, did the opposite way. 1 is the largest, 6 is the smallest. There were no #1s on the Great Lakes. So #2 is the biggest one on the Great Lakes. 1s are usually on the Atlantic seaboard. So we have a #2 Fresnel lens in our collection. We have a 3.5 and we have a 4. And the 4 that we have is the exact same one they would have had in the Marquette Harbor Lighthouse. So they don't make Fresnel lenses anymore. So there aren't very many of them in the world anymore. So if we have them, you're lucky to have them. So the fact that we have 3, we feel very lucky. And people come in here and don't understand exactly what they are, but it's just stunning when you see it for the first time.
How big is a #2 lens?
Well, I mean, they come in different shapes. And so it just kind of depends how big the light is. They're not specific sizes. It's just, that,
okay.
like, so #1 is the smallest or #1 is the biggest. I keep saying that the wrong way. #1 is the biggest, #6 is the smallest, and they're kind of made to order to fit, in the certain lighthouses.
Okay. And then if somebody were to come here, they've never been here before, talk to us about what they can expect when they come here. I know you talked about the Fresnel lenses. What are some other things that you think that people, if they were going to come here, make it a point to see this?
Right. So we have 2 other exhibits that I'm really proud of. The first one is right when you walk in the door. We have this called the Darter Dace Annex. We had a captain from World War II named David McClintock, who's from Marquette, who was the captain of a submarine called the USS Darter. And he was really instrumental in the United States winning the Battle of Leyte Gulf in the Philippines in World War II. And we have an
Nice.
entire room dedicated to that. The exhibit includes a working periscope in the middle of the room, so you can look in the periscope and do a complete 360. Like, we just had a field trip in this morning, and the kids can find the lighthouse, and then they turn and they say, oh, look, there's somebody walking on the bike path. And so it's really fun to look through the periscope.
When you say it's functioning, it's functioning. Like you can see outside right now.
Yes, it's great.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, so that's one thing that people really like. And I don't think people understand really how instrumental McClintock was in this battle. I mean, even people from Marquette haven't really heard of him in that sense. And so it's nice to be able to give him credit where it's due for everything that he did. We also have a fantastic exhibit on Lake Superior shipwrecks and Marquette shipwrecks with maps and details about different ships that have gone down and some that are still out there that they haven't found and ones that they have found, including some ship models all kinds of different things that you can look at.
It's interesting you say that because I want to say that I read somewhere that the Great Lakes has got the greatest number of shipwrecks.
Yes. Yes. So they actually don't even know how many shipwrecks there are. There maybe in Lake Superior, there may be 600 that they know about and just because there's a shipwreck doesn't mean that there's still something to find. There could be a shipwreck and then they recovered the ship, but a lot of times there are still ships at the bottom of the lake. Like we have an exhibit on the Henry B. Smith, which is a ship that was lost in 1913, and it took them 100 years to find it because it was 500 feet down in a place where they weren't
Wow.
expecting to look. I mean, it's a big lake, lots of different depth changes, and so there are places in the lake where there are lots of rock shoals and all kinds of things going on, and there's shipwrecks everywhere.
I guess so. Hillary, if somebody is listening to this and they want to come and check out the museum, they're coming to Marquette to visit, maybe they
Yeah.
even live here in Marquette.
Yeah.
How can they find you? Where can they go?
So we have a pretty prominent Facebook page. If you look up Marquette Maritime Museum, we also have a website, mqtmaritimemuseum.com, which has got basically everything you need to know. There's a plan your visit page on there where you can figure out ticket prices and everything. But we are open from mid-May to mid-October, so we are seasonal because of the weather in Marquette. And we are closed Mondays, but that doesn't mean we're not busy on Mondays. Usually on Mondays, we're doing like kids' art history workshops or something like that. But we do have a calendar of events on our website and on our Facebook page. We have all kinds of things going on in the summer still to come. We do evening lighthouse tours. We do sunrise tours. We have a paranormal team that does lighthouse paranormal tours, and you can actually do paranormal investigations. It's a great group that has been doing that for us as fundraisers for a few years, and it's really fun. In the winter months, if you happen to be visiting Marquette in the winter months, we do a series called Maritime History on Tap at one of the local brew pubs, the Ordock Brewing Company. So once a month, you can come and get a beer and listen to some maritime history, usually some kind of slideshow or presentation or a musical group.
That is cool.
It's really fun. Yeah, it's a way to stay sort of involved in the winter, keep our name out there. It's fun.
That is excellent. Hillary, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to chat with us today. Really do appreciate it.
Yeah, I love talking about this museum. It's a great place.
Excellent. And for our audience, you can always roll on over to totalmichigan.com, click on Hillary's interview, and get the links that she mentioned earlier. We'll see you next time when we talk to another Michigander doing some pretty extraordinary things. We'll see you then.